that was fighting for gay rights, and people were killed.
Nobody was killed at Stonewall.
Nobody was killed.
Over the course of time, there's been a wide range of personalities that have entered the workroom of RuPaul's Drag Race. One of them being Shannel, who along with her talented display of drag had a vast amount of confidence and always carried herself like a star. In this video, I'm going to be talking about the legendary and iconic Shannel, how she helped make history with her appearance on the OG seasons of the show, and why I consider her to be the original Drag Race diva. But before we start, I wanted to remind you to please subscribe if you haven't already, and follow me on Twitter at GreenGateYT for updates on future videos. When it comes to RuPaul's Drag Race Season 1, at first glance, it can seem like a very unappealing season to watch. But if you actually put in the effort to force yourself to sit through at least the first episode, you'll actually find it's a lot more enjoyable than you might think. To start off, the first queen to ever walk into the workroom was Shannel. And if we lived in a perfect utopia, she would have gone on to win every single challenge. However, the reality would be far different, with Shannel never winning any of the maxi challenges. Now, even though it was just season 1, Shannel's drag was pretty elevated. A lot of her looks would go on to be some of the best of the season. These looks were also heightened by the way Shannel would sell her drag while showcasing it to the judges. I mean, who else can say they juggled down the runway without missing a beat and still look this good? Although, if we're talking about her runways, her most infamous one would have to be her delicious Miss Mandarin, where she showcased just how flexible her tongue was by making some lizard sounds.
Well, hi there. I'm the delicious Miss Mandarin.
On season 1 episode 3, on the runway, Shannel would serve this Medusa inspired outfit, along with a very detailed headpiece. But later on, RuPaul critiqued Shannel for not showing enough versatility, resulting in Shannel landing in the bottom 2 for the first time against Akasha. They would lip sync to The Greatest Love of All by Whitney Houston. There would then be a gag in the middle of the lip sync as Shannel's headpiece fell off, only for Shannel to continue on the performance with very emotional expressions. This ended up giving her an edge, with RuPaul announcing Shannel as the winner of the lip sync. Now, when this first happened, many people thought that the headpiece falling off was an accident, including RuPaul, who would then ask Shannel about it at the reunion. And to everyone's surprise, Shannel said that the gag was actually planned in advance, because since the judges said that they weren't seeing any vulnerability, she thought that doing this would be a great way to show it. RuPaul then told Shannel he was very surprised to learn this information along with the viewers at home. But what do you guys think? Was the headpiece falling off planned in advance, or simply just a mistake? Moving on to season 1 episode 6, the competition had come down to 4 queens: Bibi Zahara Benet, Rebecca Glasscock, Nina Flowers, and Shannel. While on the runway for the episode, RuPaul asked the queens who they thought should go home, resulting in Bibi and Nina nominating Rebecca Glasscock, with Rebecca choosing Shannel, and for yet another gag in the season, Shannel would end up nominating herself, citing that she felt that the judges hadn't been appreciating her at all throughout the season, despite the fact that she had been consistently performing well and showcasing some high level of drag entertainment. The judges then reaffirmed to her that she was a gorgeous and talented queen, but at this point, Shannel just wasn't having it, since it was very clear that she had reached her boiling point. Although I do have to add that even though you could tell Shannel was super agitated by what was going on, the way she expresses herself is just so intriguing. By the time they got to the reunion, Shannel said that she was super frustrated with a lot of the judging throughout the season, feeling that Rebecca Glasscock should have been the one to go home on that episode, and that no matter what anyone else says, the truth is that Rebecca actually lost that lip sync, but the reason she stayed was because Shannel had already decided that she wanted to leave. Now, a big reason why Shannel decided she wanted to leave the production of season 1 was because of Santino Rice. According to her, Santino consistently gave negative critiques to Shannel. Even on the episode where she juggled down the runway, Santino seemed to not have anything nice to say. When confronted about this at the reunion, Santino would end up doubling down on his comments, saying that Shannel just didn't have a sense of style, telling her that even the outfit she wore to the reunion looked really cheap. The moment would end in RuPaul giving Shannel a hug, only for Santino Rice to also offer a hug, but Shannel rejected it into oblivion. But things didn't end there. Shannel actually confronted production about some of the things that had gone on in the season, feeling that from the very beginning it seemed like RuPaul personally didn't like Shannel, to which Ru says that Shannel shouldn't need Ru's approval in order to succeed in the competition. But Shannel rebuttals that it was unfair treatment because the other queens had been getting a lot more praise than she was. Specifically, it seemed that the treatment towards Rebecca Glasscock is what really had been getting to her, as Rebecca was a young queen on the scene whose drag style was a lot less subdued than the other competitors. And a lot of the judges' critiques tended to be more about the amount of growth Rebecca displayed on the show as opposed to the actual quality of her drag. This bothered Shannel because it seemed that factors irrelevant of talent were being used as a metric for how far a queen can make it on the show. In February 2009, RuPaul's Drag Race Season 1 would air its final episode. And in just over 3 years, in the fall of 2012, Shannel would become part of the first ever AllStars cast. Now, as you know, AllStars 1 had a very low budget, so low that they could only afford to film a 6-episode season. But they didn't want to have to sacrifice by getting a smaller cast, so they decided to create the twist of having queens compete in pairs, which then made it possible for 12 queens to compete on a 6-episode season by having 2 queens go home every week. A twist that would completely tarnish the quality of the season. I imagine that when AllStars 1 was announced, the queens who must have been the most excited were the Season 1 queens. I mean, by this point, Season 4 had just aired and the audience for the show had skyrocketed like crazy. On AllStars 1 Episode 1, after Ru revealed the twist to the queens, they then had to vote for which queen they would like to be paired with. In the first round of voting, Shannel and Chad Michaels ended up choosing each other off the bat, and Mimi on First also voted to be paired with Chad Michaels, and Alexis Mateo voted to be paired with Shannel. Chad Michaels had also just come off Season 4, landing as one of the runner-ups. And to top it all off, Shannel and Chad had known each other for many years before any of them ever made it on Drag Race. And they were both also super polished, which is funny because the most consistent critique that they would get throughout the season was that they exuded too much perfection. By the end of the first episode, Chad Michaels and Shannel would be placed in the bottom 2 along with Mimi on First and Pandora Box. That's when another twist was revealed for the Lip Sync for Your Life, the rules being that from each of the pairs, only one queen can perform on stage. They also added an emergency button for the queens that had to sit out, so that if at any point they felt like their partner wasn't doing good enough, they could press it and switch places with them mid-song. However, the emergency button would never be used by the queens. The only time it happened was when Yara Sofia replaced Alexis Mateo mid-lip sync but ended up losing to Raven. Anyways, Shannel and Chad were a very good pairing, and they were both pretty neck and neck in terms of trajectory in the competition, which is why I always found it weird that specifically with AllStars 1, the top 2 would end up being Chad Michaels and Raven. I mean, the very fact that Shannel and Chad were on the same team meant that they both had the exact same track record. And of course, while track record doesn't matter nowadays, back then it tended to play a huge role. But I guess it was more suspenseful to have a member from each of the 2 final pairs face off against each other. So when it comes to Shannel's run on Season 1 and AllStars 1 of RuPaul's Drag Race, it's something that while she's grateful for the opportunities it brought her, the run she had on the show wasn't the way she wished it had gone. And while she did play pivotal roles in both her seasons, she can't help but think there isn't much of a point in ever coming back for AllStars. Because, quote, "Is the third time the charm, or do I just look foolish by continuing to try and paddle behind a boat?" She goes on to say that she's at a point in her life where she's truly happy and comfortable with everything, so she's not sure if she'd want to change it. She's also not sure if she'd be able to keep up with the new format of the show. Now, when World of Wonder began to cast queens from AllStars 1 onto the new AllStars seasons, what surprised me the most was that they focused on queens whose original seasons were 2, 3, and 4. I mean, sure, maybe a lot of the Season 1 queens don't have the biggest following, but there's also a sort of marketability in casting a queen from the original Drag Race season. I mean, from AllStars 2 until AllStars 7, the only Season 1 girls that have come back are Bibi Zahara Benet on AllStars 3 and Angina on AllStars 5, who after being one of the most hyped queens to come back to the show would end up going home second. Subsequently, in AllStars 3, when the twist was announced that Bibi Zahara Benet would be competing alongside the other AllStars queens, it created drama online with many fans saying that it wasn't fair to invite someone back who had already won the crown. But the argument from the show's standpoint was that the first season of Drag Race was so long ago that Bibi deserved to have some glory within the newly found fanbase of the show. A couple years later, in an interview with Hey Queen in 2020, Shannel said that even after all this time, she doesn't fully understand why production asked a former winner to come back and compete. It's also interesting that the production was able to acknowledge that the season 1 queens deserved more praise, but it wasn't reflected in future castings. I mean, especially lately, a lot of the cast for All-Star seasons have been very random selections. And don't get me wrong, every queen that makes it back on the show completely deserves it. It's more so that the queens that the fan base has consistently been asking to see back on the screen have never been contacted, or at least as far as we know. For instance, Diva has still yet to make her All-Stars debut despite literally everyone wanting to see her back. Or Layla McQueen, who despite getting more and more popular with every year that went by, was never cast. But probably my biggest question is why April Carry On has not been asked back. I mean, April famously said at the season 6 finale that she was actually meant to win All-Stars 2. And just as a fun fact, April Carry On was the first queen to consistently upload her unseen looks on Instagram with somewhat professional photo shoots, something that would later be popularized by Kim Chi. If you didn't know, Shannel is also a multi-talented artist, being able to juggle, tightrope, and perform on stilts. Which is funny because this large repertoire of talents would mean her talent show performance would most likely be one of the more original ones we would have gotten to see. In 2020, the first season of RuPaul's Secret Celebrity Drag Race was released, and it wouldn't take very long before there was drama attached to it. The concept of the show is that on each episode, 3 celebrities enter the workroom, who are then paired with a Drag Race alumni that helps them get into drag and doing their performance on the main stage. Yet the show presented things in a way where it seemed that the queens they got paired with were doing the makeover. But behind the scenes, Mayhem Miller, Layla McQueen, and Shannel were the ones putting on the makeup on the celebrities. There was a couple scenes filmed including the 3 queens, but the show would end up cutting them out of the final edit. This resulted in Shannel calling them out online, and a social media frenzy ensued. This resulted in World of Wonder releasing an exclusive video on YouTube which credited the queens with their work. Aside from this, the only other times that Shannel appeared on Drag Race was on Season 8 Episode 1 and the finale episode of Season 10. I also mentioned this in my fun facts video, but back in the day, Shannel dated Derek Barry, who would go on to be the 100th queen to walk into the workroom. Their relationship would end up lasting a couple months. But while on Hey Queen, Derek Barry revealed the moment he realized that dating Shannel wasn't going to work out, recalling a moment that they were both in a car and Shannel turned to Derek and said, "I just don't think you could do what I do." As of recently, Shannel ended up getting into some drama when in August of 2022, she would end up making the headlines of many media outlets being accused of stealing money from the purse of one of the people watching her show. The video did show Shannel reaching into a person's bag and pulling out some money, but the person who the purse belonged to would go on to state that Shannel actually stole over $700 from her purse. Shannel would then release an apology saying that she apologizes for taking money out of someone's purse without any consent, but that she didn't have any ill intentions in doing so. It was supposed to be a little joke that's occasionally played on audience members, who afterwards are given a small compensation by the bar for participating in the act. But Shannel affirms in the video that she has in fact learned her lesson and won't ever do that again. Now, what Shannel did was of course a stupid thing to do, as really it was only a matter of time until something like this were to happen. But what I found super alarming was the way the story was able to go viral the way it did. And no, I'm not just talking about the Drag Race fandom, but more so how mainstream media outlets like TMZ, NBC, or Entertainment Weekly were also reporting on the story. Like, ignoring the ethics around what Shannel did, drag queens seem to have become the target of many news stories, with political debates on whether or not drag queens should be allowed near kids, or homophobic attacks on drag queens trying to do a story hour. To us Drag Race fans, the Shannel story is sort of just some fun drama drama that we can laugh and be entertained by. But at a larger scale, it's these same stories that are reinforcing to a lot of the general population that drag queens are not to be trusted, and fueling a lot of hate towards the LGBT community. So these days, whenever there's a big news story that comes out regarding a drag queen, I'm a lot more inclined to be skeptical than automatically convinced. In conclusion, Shannel was part of 2 of the shortest seasons of the Rupaul Drag Race franchise, with both Season 1 and AllStars 1. Along with that, she's also been a queen who for the most part is pretty under the radar. I mean, she doesn't have much of an online presence and seems to focus her career on just doing her regular gigs, along with working the Las Vegas Strip. I also wanted to encourage any of you guys who haven't watched the first season to try your best and do it. You'll walk out of it being a delicious Miss Mandarin. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I want to take a moment to thank my patrons, Matthew Burns, Damien Spinkshirt, Azure, Emma Malander, and Cayman Rider Furry. And if you'd like to support me on Patreon, you can find the link in the description. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Please subscribe if you haven't already, and for updates on future videos, you can follow me on Twitter at GreenGayYT. I'll see you guys next time.